Well, hello everyone, Texy88 here and welcome to another review. And now I'm looking at the Commodore 64 version of Driller by Incentive Software. I've reviewed the Spectrum Amstrad version and now I want to see what this version's like. And the first thing I noticed, like the Amstrad version, it's not limited by the colour issues that force the Spectrum version to go monochrome. Although the stippling effect is noticeably blockier than in the other two versions of this game. The controls seem to be the same. Oh dear. Oh dear. The frame rate is pretty poor. Oh my goodness me. Look at this, it's so slow. I mean, it took 2 seconds just to redraw the next viewpoint, and that's in a building. Oh, right, that's my shield and energy topped up. Oh my god, this is so slow. The controls are the same as in the other two versions. I'm going to do the same test that I did in the previous one. See if X6400Y6050 facing north is going to get me the 100% success rate. I mean, this is pretty good music, I have to admit. Right, so just set my step counter. A. Oh yeah, of course I'm not dead straight, so that's what... Right, that's X6400 to see if Y6050 facing north will do exactly the same thing for me as it did in the CPC version and would have done in the Spectrum version had I figured out the controls quickly enough. Right, so that's X6400Y6050 facing north. Should give me 100% if the other versions are anything to go by. Yep, so it seems like the coordinates are the same regardless of which of the three main versions of the main 8-bit computer versions of the game you do. Oh god, this is so slow. Right, shoot this to get that door to appear. Downside is if there's music, there's no sound effects, so... obsidian. I think I'll come back to that later. Oh my goodness me, this is so slow. You look at that. It's taking several seconds just to do the next viewpoint at times. Even though the Amstrad version was slightly slower than the Spectrum version, it didn't get that bad. I mean, obviously we're talking about 8-bit machines here, so expecting it to be as smooth as a polygon-based game today, it would be a tall order. But it does seem to me as if the Commodore 64 just can't handle polygons, especially not solid ones like you get in Driller. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Oh, God. Oh, dear me. This is really not very good speed at all. I mean, you wouldn't mind so much, but it's so slow, and you do have a time limit in this. You have 4 hours to complete the entire mission of placing all 18 drilling rigs on each side of this moon. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's so slow. When there's not a great deal on screen, but when there's even just a little bit too much compared to what's happening in the Speccy and Amstrad versions, this is very, very lumbering. Oh, goodness me. This isn't good at all. See, look how slow this is. Just press right. See, look, that took over a second just to do that. Oh, God, look at this. It's unbearable. This was way too ambitious from the Commodore 64, and it really shows. Such a shame, because the music in it is really good and atmospheric, and it's just... Oh, dearie me. The Commodore 64 may be good at sprite-based stuff to a point, but give it to solid filled polygons and it seems like it just falls apart. Oh, dearie me, this is so slow. Another thing I don't like about there not being any actual sound effects is that it can be a bit worrying when you have to worry about the fact that you could potentially be falling down. And the sound effects are also a good way of helping to know for certain whether you're actually on top of something or not. Ah, I see that after a while the music restarts. Oh, darn, so close. That's better. I was just a bit too far away from... So probably a bit further over in that direction I could have got close to, or actually 100%. Oh dear. This is really slow. Of course, it's hard to maneuver yourself correctly when it's as slow as this. Ah, this is the room with the pylon in it. We each have to shoot down all the wires. Ugh, look how choppy and sluggish this is. In order to be enjoyable, this really needed a good speed boost. I can't help feeling that they should have done away with some of the stippling effects. Or maybe, just maybe... No, damn it, press the wrong button. Ugh. Or maybe just the Commodore 64 these polygons are just too much for it. Some of the colour choices are a bit of an eyesore compared to what they were in the Amstrad version as well. They're a bit too bright for my liking. Oh God, it's so unresponsive with the controls. There's such a delay between you actually pressing something happening. And that's a real problem when you can get shot multiple times while you're still trying to wait for the next part of the screen to redraw. I mean, I was even struggling to switch from movement to crosshair because it was just so slow. And as a result of that, I've lost half my shield. That massive laser beacon which would have pummeled me with fire had I not shot all the wires on that pylon. Trust me, you definitely do not want to go under that if you haven't shot off all the wires. It would just rip you apart very quickly. The other thing I don't like about the fact that there's no actual sound effects is that you might shoot something and not know whether or not anything had happened unless it happened right in front of you. So from that point of view, having no sound effects can actually be quite a problem. There's where the reconnaissance jet is. It's in there, but I'm not going to go into that. Oh, God. 1, 2, 3. Look, it's taking about 2 seconds just to draw the next frame. That's how much the Commodore 64 is struggling to cope with all these filled polygons. I mean, I do like the way when your shield or energy is low, well, the energy is low at the moment, and it changes the colour of the reading from green to red. I like that. That's a good thing because it helps to draw your attention to it. Even the movement of these crosshairs is really quite sluggish. See, look, the door's disappeared. I know I can shoot the wall to get it to reappear, but it's another case of something happening when that you can't possibly be aware of because because there's no sound that lets you know whether or not shooting something has actually done anything. Unless, of course, what you shot does affect something that's right in front of you at the time of shooting, which isn't always the case in Driller. No, I don't want to go there. It's just such a shame. I mean, I've been playing for about 16 minutes, nearly 17 minutes, and I've barely got anywhere because the frame rate is so bad. Another thing that worries me about Driller in all formats is the fact that when I was looking back at some of the puzzles that you had to do in order to complete the game, some of them by today's standards would probably be deemed to be quite obtuse. I mean, if you had to read some of them, you'd probably think, well, how the hell was I meant to know that? Oh, God, this is so slow. Even when the music stops, comes to an end, there's no sound. You really need sound effects for a game like this to work, unfortunately, because some of it relies on let's go this way. Oh, the room with the Christmas tree in it. One slight change of the controls from the other two versions is that in the other versions you could press 0 to fire. That doesn't work in the Commodore 64 version, so some of the controls are slightly different. No. This isn't really the good version to go for. If you want to have a decent 8-bit version of Driller, then Spectrum or Amstrad is the only way to go. I I'm sorry for the Commodore 64 fans, but this is just far too slow to be even remotely enjoyable. I can't make any more drilling rigs because my energy's too low. Oh, goodness me. This just isn't a playable version. It's too slow, and it just takes too long for the most part. It just takes too long for controls to respond. I mean, there has to be a precious little on screen for it to be going as fast as it is here. It's just too much for the poor Commodore 64. Oh, I shot that. Well, that one isn't changing now. Thank you. Is that some kind of a glitch or something? And the door's disappeared again. Oh, this is so slow. It's just such a shame that all things considered, I think I'm going to end the review here. So that's Driller for the Commodore 64. Valiant attempt, but unfortunately it just seems as if the Commodore 64 just can't handle solid 3D polygons. Graphics, the stippling effect is quite blocky, and unfortunately, and it makes it look a little bit cruder than the other two versions I've reviewed. I mean, I know that Spectrum used a stippling effect, but that was sort of forced upon it because of its attribute limitations that caused it to have to be in monochrome. And the other is that the general colours they've used make they just look bland compared to the ones used in the Amstrad version. So it's not great. Sound, well, it's got a nice tune, but without sound effects, there's a danger anyone who wasn't familiar with Driller perhaps from other versions would be shooting things and not realizing that that something that should have happened didn't. I don't quite know what happened there. My energy it's just suddenly removed every last bit of my energy and killed me. But anyway, the fact that there's no sound effects in this unfortunately means you could be shooting something and not realise something had happened unless what it did was just happen to be right in front of you. That's not so bad if you know what you're doing, but if you don't, then that's a big problem, because in the other two versions you actually had a sound effect when shooting something had some kind of effect somewhere else. You don't get that in this. You get this music instead, which is admittedly atmospheric and foreboding music, but without sound effects as well. There are some vital clues you could be missing out on. Gameplay. A few of the controls are different to the other two versions. I mean, Naught, for instance, no longer fires your laser the way it did in the other two versions. I actually had to press shift instead. But the biggest problem with this game is that for the most part everything just moves too slowly and choppily for the game to be any kind of fun. The Commodore 64 simply can't handle this kind of thing. And it really is such a shame. And also the fact that I mentioned about the lack of sound effects not giving clues as to what might have happened could also be another thing that puts people off the game if they're not familiar with the other versions and therefore wouldn't know what they were meant to be doing. So generally this is a disappointing version, and I can't give it as high a score as the other two versions, I'm afraid. It's just not enjoyable enough. It's just not fast enough to be anywhere near as enjoyable as the other two versions. So I'm going to have to give Driller on the Commodore 64 5 out of 10. It just isn't in the same league as the other two versions I've reviewed. And I can't say I enjoyed playing it as much as those other two versions either. It's just too slow. And the fact that that timer in the top right corner keeps strict time even when the frame rate is at its lowest, that is potentially a big problem as well. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that review. Catch you on another video soon. Texie88 out.